Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Over the past few weeks, there have been a few polls that are showing something no one expected, and that is rising voter sentiment toward Republicans over Democrats in California, with the front runner for the governor's race actually being a Republican. What do these numbers mean? Could this be the start of a red wave in 2026? And for the first time since 2011, is it possible that a Republican could be elected for governor here in our state? I'm breaking it all down for you today. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information or sources cited in compiling today's episode, then you should check out the corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. Last week, we looked at Democrat candidate Katie Porter, and we saw that there were some viral clips of her going around that have voters questioning both her moral character in order to be governor of the state, as well as just general likability and if they actually want to elect her. Now, since those videos have come out, she has since apologized. She said that she could have done better in both the interview situation as well as the situation where she was yelling at her staffer. But unfortunately, it seems like the damage is done, as is so often the case in politics. And so voters really are looking elsewhere at who they want to vote for and who they want to start getting to know and get behind before next year's midterm. There have been a few different polls taken within the last few months, mostly in September, trying to gauge voter sentiment on issues like these as well as candidates. And the most shocking poll recently showed that the number one frontrunner in the governor's race is actually Republican candidate Steve Hilton. So in this poll, Hilton was polling at 29%, Porter was lagging behind him at 23%, and then Bianco was following, who is another Republican. And what's interesting is this poll takes into account campaign messaging. And so really it was trying to pull from likely California voters. When you look at what these campaigns are actually standing for, when you look at the policies behind the candidates, who are you most likely to support or most inclined to vote for? And so we are seeing that Hilton is really pulling ahead of some of the other candidates, especially many of the Democrat candidates who are way down in the polls, but also specifically in front of Katie Porter, who was in the lead for so long. Now, this is still clearly very early. We have over a year to go before we're actually voting in the midterms, and so there's a lot of times for things to shift and change. But I still think that this early sentiment is important. It's good for us to know where voters are at now so that we can really capitalize on that in the months to follow. And if the sentiment really is that most Californians are wanting the type of change that Steve Hilton or other Republicans can offer, then we should show them that their policies are going to be the most effective as opposed to the other candidates in the race. So we will just have to see what shakes out in the next few weeks, and there could be more candidates jumping in the race last minute, but it's still important for us to understand. But before getting into more of this polling, because there are more that we need to cover, let's just slow down for a second and ask the question, who is Steve Hilton? If he is now the front runner, then we need to understand what he stands for, as well as his background, and maybe why he's becoming so popular among likely voters. Well, Hilton was actually born in the UK. His parents were refugees from Hungary, and they fled there, and then he was born there. And while he was there, he studied at Oxford, and he actually became the director of strategy for the Conservative Party under the former British Prime Minister. So he's been very involved in politics in his career, but not always United States politics. He moved to the United States in 2012, and he actually moved here to start a political tech startup. After that, he started to host a show on Fox News, and that's probably what he's most known for. He started that in 2017, and then he became a U.S. citizen. And he describes his life in California as really attaining the true American dream. And he used his Fox News show, which was called The Next Revolution, to describe California really as the warning to America, arguing that a lot of its policies on major issues like crime, homelessness, or the economy really, again, was that warning to the rest of the United States of the direction that we could potentially go in if we continue to embrace a liberal ideology. So when it comes to his campaign for governor, his slogan is to make California golden again. And it is all focused on trying to reform California in all of the ways that it has been broken for the last several decades. So let's just go a little bit through the main points of his policy positions. I don't want to dive too much into it today, but let's just get an idea of what he stands for and what he would do as governor. When it comes to the economy, he points out the hypocrisy in California's leaders who often cite that California is the 5th largest economy. And while that's true, he says that over a third of Californians struggle just to pay for their basic necessities. And so it's really misleading to just say, well, California is thriving. We're the 5th largest economy. So why are you criticizing us for our economics? Well, people criticize you because it's so unaffordable to live here that your economy may be great, but the spending is out of control. And so on the points of economy, he wants to reduce regulations to make the state more business friendly, because that is really what brings a state to be able to thrive, is to have a competitive business environment. He wants to cut the tax burden on the residents here. So he actually has a plan to remove taxes from income of under $100,000. And then anything over that would just have a flat tax. So it'd be very fair across the board. And then with that, because they would be bringing in less revenue from taxes, he also wants to reduce government spending, which in California is really not that difficult of a goal, because as he points out, in the last year, over $80 billion were spent just on 3 programs that proved no results. If you remember, one of them was the homelessness program. Homelessness is still a huge issue across California, and literally no one can explain what the money did. That was just one of 3 programs where money was basically thrown in the trash and didn't do anything. And so he wants to root out more programs like that and cut hundreds of billions of dollars just from waste, fraud, and abuse. That then goes into housing, where his main focus is really on every Californian being able to afford a single family home if they want it. Personally, I love that. That resonates with my situation as well. And so how he would do that is he would cut CEQA, as we've talked about many times on the show. He wants to cut so many regulations so that housing development is easier. He points out that California is largely underdeveloped, but we have a lot of space and a lot of land, and so we should be taking advantage of that. And he ultimately wants to end the war on single-family homes. People like California because there's space, because you can go out in the yard to enjoy the sunshine that we actually have year-round. And so he wants to make that affordable and make that popular again. Another great point he makes is on education. He says that our education system is failing, and we know that to be true. And many like to point to public education and say that it's failing because of a lack of funding. But he points out that education has consistently received over a quarter, nearly 30 to 40% of funds from the state budget, regardless of how much money was in the budget year over year. And so it's really not due to a lack of funding. It is due to a lack of having high enough standards. And so some of the solutions that he wants to implement are being able to grade schools, being able to grade teachers, and really having a more merit-based system so that bad teachers and bad schools can be either fired if you're a teacher or reformed as a school. And so with that, parents would have more input. They'd have more say in their child's education, which we know is very popular among conservatives, as well as just the rising sentiment among people who have had their children in public school for a long time and are now pulling them out to go to charters or private schools. And with that, he wants to expand charter schools if that's what the Californian people want. And he wants to make school choice more easily accessible to everyone. That leads into parental rights, where Hilton affirms that laws and regulations work best when they are designed for the vast majority of people who do the right thing versus the tiny minority who don't. And so he's really pointing out there that it is not teachers' jobs to parent students because they believe that every student has terrible parents who don't love them. Instead, it is teachers' jobs to facilitate the relationship in order to tell and inform the parent of what's going on day to day in the classroom. And it's ultimately up to the parent to do the right thing in how they raise their child. And that extends to more than just schools, but also just to our state laws. We have so many laws in California that really strip away parental rights, that give a lot of those rights to the state. And it is not the state's job to walk in and parent children. States should only intervene in the most serious of circumstances like true abuse, as well as other really unfortunate situations. But again, he's saying that that's the minority, that's not the majority. And I would agree with that. And so we can't strip away fundamental parental rights just because some people forfeit those parental rights. It's not correct to apply that to the whole population. And then with crime, he supported Proposition 36. He wants to see it actually funded in our state. That's been a huge issue lately, is actually funding the proposition that voters passed. So he wants to fund it, he wants to support it, and he wants to support law enforcement to actually be able to do their jobs, as well as to make sure that criminals are caught, prosecuted, and convicted, which we definitely need in California. So the overall message of Hilton's campaign is that whether you're conservative or liberal, he is saying that most Californians are aware that California is broken, that there are a lot of things that we have declined in over the years and that change needs to happen. And so he puts it this way. He says, I think people are desperate for change, and I want to be the candidate that is clearly out there arguing for the positive, practical changes we need. And it's really not partisan. And so I love that. I think a lot of these issues don't need to be partisan. I don't think that crime or parental rights or whatnot needs to be a partisan issue that divides us. And so even though you as a Democrat might feel like you don't want to vote for a Republican, Steve Hilton is really trying to say this isn't about conservative or liberal. This is about clear issues we see in our state. So here are some practical solutions that we can take if you elect me that will make your life tangibly better. And here's the thing. There are other polls that are showing that this is the broader sentiment among voters, even across the nation, as well as in California. And so nationally, in September, there was a Reuters Ipsos poll that showed that voters have more confidence in Republicans than in Democrats on a wide variety of topics. And so if you look at it, Republicans came out really high in crime, really high in immigration, in foreign policy, in the economy, even in gun control, which is surprising that voters would have a higher sentiment in Republicans for gun control, because usually that's a Democrat talking point. But in that, Republicans came out higher, and even corruption and political extremism. The only categories that Democrats were substantially ahead of Republicans in were healthcare, women's rights, aka abortion, and environmentalism. And really, that is no surprise because Republicans usually would see healthcare as something that's more of a commodity than a human right. And so Democrats are the ones who usually want to expand that to all people. Obviously, conservatives don't agree with abortion, so we don't even see that as being a women's health issue. And then with environmentalism, I think that a lot of conservatives usually think of the extremes, the climate change agenda, the leftist activism, versus just standard things like clean air, clean water. And so really, this poll is huge because this reveals what voters actually think and not just what the media says. And so it would be really easy to look at the media and think that most of the country disagrees with Donald Trump, that most of the country doesn't like the MAGA movement or agree with conservatism. But one, that's not true because Donald Trump was elected. So clearly a majority does want his policies. And then more than that, this polling is showing that the average American has way more faith in someone like Donald Trump or just in the Republican Party in general rather than in Democrats. And so that is going to bleed down into California because California is part of the country. And so we're not just completely siloed off. There are going to be people here who agree with that sentiment. And we have seen that they agree with that sentiment is specifically in voter registration. Now, this is very, very exciting. So listen closely. As of September 5th, Republicans have registered 48,000 new voters in California. Democrats have registered just over 100. Isn't that insane? Democrats have registered around 100 new voters, but Republicans are in the tens of thousands. 48,000 is not an insignificant number. And so I think often California is written off as just a one-party state. Change can't be made. Everyone who lives here is liberal. But that's not true. There is a shifting political sentiment, shifting political tides, even here in our deeply blue state. We're seeing that change isn't just isolated to rural areas of California that are traditionally red, but it's bleeding into more of the major cities. And I think a large reason for that is people in major cities see the decline firsthand. And so if you are tired of living right next to crime, homelessness, or other issues, or you are tired of paying really high cost of living because it is highest in major cities, you want to see those things changed. And so you might consider voting for someone who's not in your usual political party because your political party hasn't actually made the positive change that you want to see. A lot of the decline in California and a lot of the changes necessary in order to stop the decline shouldn't be partisan. And so, like I said, parental rights are not partisan. Successful education should not be partisan. Lowering crime around our major cities shouldn't be partisan. Lowering the cost of living and making housing more affordable. None of these issues are things that need to be partisan. These are things that can be objectively agreed on. Something like the economy, we can objectively agree on the principles that rule the economy and see what changes need to be made in order to make it more affordable to live here. But unfortunately, we have seen so many of our past governors, as well as just our leaders in government and in our legislature, making every single issue a political fight. And it really does seem like the Democrats, specifically in California, I'm not saying everywhere, but the Democrats in California just hate conservatism so much that they will do whatever it takes. They will go any lengths in order just to disagree. And so if you say the sky is blue, they will fight you to the death that it is purple. And so along with voter registration, there's also been a shift in political party preference. So the way that people are registered to vote ahead of the special election in just a few weeks. And so 45% of registered voters are Democrats, clearly still the majority. 25% are Republicans. And interestingly, 23% are registered as no party preference, with the remaining 7% as being some other category. So I want to explain why this is positive for conservatives, because you might hear that and be like, Republicans are 25% and Democrats are 45%. That's not good news for us, right? But what hinges on it being a good thing for us is that no party preference. And a lot of people are describing no party preference as GOP light, so Republican-esque. And we have seen this across the entire United States. So again, it's not a surprise that it's even spreading to California. But if you think of people like RFK Jr., or if you think of people like Joe Rogan, these are people who are not traditionally conservative, and I would say even now are not conservatives necessarily politically, but they have endorsed and supported, and RFK even works in the Trump administration. Why have they done that? Well, because they were traditional Democrats, so they saw maybe some issues liberally, but it didn't mean that they couldn't overlap with Republicans on certain other issues. And so in the case of RFK Jr., he can overlap with conservatives on certain issues, even if he disagrees on other issues. And so he can recognize that when he saw our country under the Biden administration, that it was in severe decline, and he didn't agree with the radical policies that Kamala Harris was putting in place. And so he stepped out of the race to endorse Trump. I think we're seeing the same thing on a state level. There's a large group of people in California who maybe they're socially liberal. Maybe they agree with a lot of liberal agendas and rationales, but they realize that when it comes to things like the economy or crime or immigration, that those things don't need to actually be a partisan issue. Maybe they don't want crime around them. They don't want to pay 50% of their income toward their housing expenses, and they don't want people living in our country who are here illegally because they think we have a legal process and they should go through it. If you think like that, what party do you fall into? It seems like you don't fall into anything because you can't go to the Democrat Party anymore. They're so far left on every single issue. But when you walk over to the Conservative Party, you still have things that you disagree with. And so now people are going to have to decide what issues are more important to you. You might be more inclined to vote with my party because you see that someone like Steve Hilton or Chad Bianco or whoever is actually going to enact policy that will make your life better on so many levels, even if you would debate them on other issues. So this is good news for conservatives because we have a chance to help persuade this group of voters over to our side to show them it's okay if we disagree. We don't have to agree on everything, but let's talk about the fundamental building blocks of what we want to do and how that will help you and maybe find some common ground on what you can agree with. And really, then this block of voters becomes the swing vote because 23% is a large amount. And if you add that to the 25% of Republicans, now we exceed the Democrats when it comes to who's actually registered to vote. And so we finally have a real chance of electing something different than just the standard Democrat Party candidate. It is leaders like Steve Hilton who remind us it is so important to stand on your values because it will actually enact real change across our state and might attract voters who want to see that change. And that is why I am so excited to be partnering with EveryLife Diaper Company. EveryLife also stands on its values, and it is fueled by its mission to bring premium products to the marketplace for every baby, because they believe that every baby is loved, every life is precious and deserving of celebration as well as protection. And they want to help you be able to do that by providing high quality diapers as well as many other products that you might need in that phase of life. EveryLife is really America's pro-life diaper company. Did you know that large diaper companies usually fund abortion? They donate a lot of your money that you're pouring into them when you buy their products to abortion clinics across the United States, which just is so wrong for so many reasons. But EveryLife is not like that. EveryLife actually donates money to pro-life pregnancy centers across the United States. And so they have been able to help save thousands of unborn lives. Plus, it's not just their mission that's life-changing. They also create great products. And so their diapers are free from fragrances, dyes, lotions, latex, parabens, and phthalates. And so they are crafted to keep your baby's skin clear and dry, as well as be super effective for you, because no one wants ineffective, terrible diapers. And I am so excited to tell you that EveryLife has just launched a brand new product line specifically for women and moms. And so they have come out with new feminine care products that are free from all of the toxins that we have heard have been in our tampons, our pads, our other products for so many years and just have been harming our bodies unknowingly. Now, EveryLife has come out with their own brand of clean, safe products specifically to help support women as well as babies. So if you check them out today, you can get 10% off of your first order using my discount code TESSA10. And you definitely should, because they have so many products for your baby. They have products for your friends who have babies, like gifting them a subscription to their diaper boxes. And now they even have products for women. So go check them out. Use my discount code TESSA10, get that 10% off, and support the show. So with all of that being said about voter sentiment in our state, now is the time. We are not yet seeing a red wave by any means, but there is a red trickle that is starting. And so now is the moment to capitalize on it and really make sure that we make serious ground in this effort, because this is the closest that we have ever been to potentially electing a Republican governor since, I said, in 2011, when we last had Schwarzenegger as our governor. And so that is very exciting, and we can't just let the moment completely slip us by in apathy. Listen to how one commentator describes it. This current trend, seemingly away from Democrats and toward Republicans, I would nonetheless be very surprised if this current trend was anything other than a temporary shift, with a reversal and return back to, ultimately reflecting ongoing support for Democratic candidates and their policies in California and elsewhere, especially going forward toward the 2026 midterm elections. We want to prove this wrong. If this is what people are believing, that it's just a temporary shift and it's going to go back, no, we don't want that. We don't want a red trickle. We want a red wave. And so we saw in 2024 that the country wanted different policies and they elected Donald Trump. And we are seeing that in California, people want different policies, and it's going to be harder here. It's going to be more work. We are still in the minority, but nonetheless, we cannot get discouraged. We cannot say that it doesn't matter, and we cannot lose the importance of this moment, because now is the time. And so one practical way to do that is with voter registration. We're already seeing that. This is one of the strengths of an organization like TPUSA. And so if you are a student on a college campus here in California, look into joining your TPUSA chapter or starting one if you don't have one on your campus, and really help to get young conservatives registered to vote, because there are a large majority of conservatives who are just not registered to vote, or they're not energized to show up at the polls. And so we need to continue getting those numbers even higher, double it, triple it, get it way past 48,000 registered Republicans. Let's get more and more people who are apathetic toward voting but would lean conservative. Let's get them registered, and let's try to inspire them to show up at the polls and make their voices heard. And one other thing that we are going to have to do is that Republicans are going to have to consolidate support. Right now, it is split. We have Chad Bianco and we have Steve Hilton. They both have great policies and both seem like great people. But we need to keep our eye on, for the rest of the year and into next year, which one is polling stronger and looking more popular with a higher chance of beating Democrat candidates, because it's not just about being popular among conservatives. It's really about who has the chance to flip those no party preference voters or even Democrat voters who are fed up with their party. And so right now it's too early to tell. We don't really need to consolidate around one person right now, but I do think that our Republican candidates are going to have to do something similar to what RFK Jr. did by endorsing one another. And so that might mean that someone like Bianco needs to step out and endorse Hilton or vice versa, depending on where voter support is, because we cannot do this thing where we split our support so much that we don't even make it into a general election because California is the top 2 primary system. And so then 2 Democrats go toward the election. That would just be horrible. And that is horrible. And it doesn't need to be that way because Hilton is polling so strongly. So let's keep an eye out. Let's see about the policies that they continue to promote. Make sure to look into each of them. Now I've covered both of them on the show. And so look into them, see who you like, and then be ready to support whoever is more popular, because policy matters over personalities. Policy matters over your personal affinity toward one candidate or the other. We just need a conservative to win. And so we can't tank ourselves by splitting our votes and by breaking up the conservative party in a state where we need everyone to stay together. And of course, the most important thing is that you need to vote. No matter if you think that it matters or not, no matter if you think there's really a chance or not, I don't care. You need to vote. And you can actually get started on this today. How? You need to vote no on Proposition 50. And that's something that we'll talk about next week. So I'll see you back here then. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. Please spread the word and share this show with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I'll see you back here next week on another episode of the California Conversation.